Hello everybody and welcome to the unit MTS503 Managing the Learning Environment. I'm Saul Konofsky. I am your unit coordinator and your tutor and your assessor. And this video is designed as an introduction into the unit and just some of the fundamentals about what we will be covering in terms of content. I'll be talking through the assessments, and towards the end of this video I will be talking a little bit about myself and my personal professional background in teaching. And so if you've had me before as your UC, you can obviously skip that end of the video if you like. You've heard it maybe more than once now, but for those of you who are joining me for the first time in terms of a unit I've delivered, you might want to get some of that context about where I have come from professionally in terms of my teaching experience and sort of my current context in the field. So managing the learning environment is a very focused unit, which I think is fantastic. As the unit title suggests, it is about the many aspects that are required from you as a manager within your particular learning environment, and the skills and the strategies that you need to be using in order to be effective in that regard of your teaching practice. However, one thing that the unit does, I feel, do very well is it has a very strong theoretical grounding. So we do tackle theory head on, and I am a big believer that I feel, particularly around classroom management, that developing a robust theoretical approach to management, what the theory and the research suggests as what is effective as you engage young people, as you build relationships with them, as you manage conflict and non-compliance as well, that you do so from that theoretical base, that you're not just flying by the seat of your pants and just doing what works. That can only get you so far, and the idea is that you develop through the unit and through the assessments that you have to do your own personal philosophy, and that's grounded in the theory. So that's the kind of umbrella context of the unit. So in regards to some of the specifics that we will be looking at, it's very important that you do, for this unit, for every unit, that you engage with the literature, and particularly the core text, the McDonald text that I have set, Classroom Management Engaging Students in Learning, the second edition. Probably more so than certainly the units that I've delivered, but maybe not in the units that you've done so far. This has a core text, and pretty much every week of all the topics, the 10 topics that we do, you'll have to be reading and engaging with the text. So it is absolutely critical that you obtain a copy of that text, you have it with you, and you do the readings each week, because all of the activities and the ways in which you engage yourself in regard to that reflective practice and, well, how do I build this robust classroom management philosophy and strategic approach to employing these skills in the classroom, comes from largely from that text. So it is really, really important that you purchase it and you take deep dives into it. And some of the chapters also have, we have multiple goes through. You'll have to really pick through it in a lot of careful detail. So I'm sure you've probably read the introduction as well in the unit outline. It's worth rereading that again at this stage. If you wanted to pause the video, have another read of the introductory paragraph. Again, just orientates you to some of the fundamental aspects that we'll be looking at, particularly around the social and ecological dynamics of teaching and learning environments. This notion of the classroom ecology, this idea that I feel is a great analogy because it gets us thinking about the classroom as a living, breathing entity that we need to really understand how it works and the shifting dynamic approach to how the environment can change and how socially context dependent it is, depending on who's in those environments and taking account of those social dynamics. As I've mentioned, the introductory text talks about being reflective and understanding the many aspects that behavior management sits within a much broader picture of classroom management and managing the learning environment. Yes, behavior management tends to be the thing we focus on the most, but it sits within a wider set of skills around classroom management, particularly in regards to learning or lesson design. So in regards to the other resources as well, just looking through here on the unit outline, and I'm going through obviously as I'm speaking, and you may want to have the unit outline open as we move through. On page 3, there's a list of other resources. Now, those are just there just to kind of point you in the right direction, as sort of some of them will be referred to in the topics and you'll need to engage with them formally, but really they form a whole context of literature for you to engage with and wider reading that you may want to do and source out these books, whether it be in a library online, if you can find digital copies through the Curtin Library, etc. But you don't have to, it's not compulsory to access all these texts, but you may want to dip in and out of them or use some of them for your assessments, just to give that broader, just to show that deeper engagement with the research and the literature. So let's just talk about assessments. Obviously, importantly, the 2 assessments were weighted 50% each, equally, due weeks 7 and 13 of the unit. So let's talk through assessment 1, the Positive Learning Framework Plan. So this is, an idea about getting a really detailed approach and a sense of, well, how are you going to be approaching classroom management? What kinds of theory are you going to be drawing upon? How are you considering the various aspects that play into, so that, in a sense, feed into how you respond to the particular learning environment that you wish to create in your classroom? So you'll see there that one of the first criteria aspects of this assessment is referencing and getting a sense of the context of young people and the what they bring to the learning environment that you're trying to create in your classroom. Responding to this idea of who are children, how are they made up, what the nature of children, how do you view that? Is it something special and unique? How do you determine the developmental stages of young people? Do you borrow from psychology for that? And obviously the psychology of learning has much to say about developmental stages. Do you take a more sociological approach? You factor in different aspects of a child's context. For example, sociology has much to say about, social class and cultural capital, for example, around children's learning and what they bring through that. So you may want to refer to that, and you find you draw upon those kinds of theoretical approaches in regards to understanding young people. How do they react to different situations? How do young people, respond to authority or control or being asked to be compliant, for example? What's your particular, which side of the spectrum do you feel that teachers need to control or coerce students, and how do you think they respond to that? How much choice should be available, say, for a Year 7 student as opposed to a Year 11 student? Should they have the same amount of choice in what they can do and direct their learning, or do you feel that there's a sliding scale there? And what is the role of you as the teacher in that context? So that's the first criteria of the assessment. It's really kind of setting the broader context of your particular framework that you're going to be creating. And then it's the next section dives into theory. And as I have already mentioned, that this unit encourages you to take a rich theoretical approach. It doesn't mean that you need to follow one theorist specifically and be an acolyte of a particular theorist. You can use a blended approach. There may be aspects of different theorists that you find really speak to you and work with you and align with the kind of teacher that you're hoping to become. And you draw upon that. It's not watering down. For me, I actually encourage a blended approach, and I think there are many aspects of different theorists that you can fold into your practice, and that's encouraged. So you've got to kind of get a sense of, well, okay, which theory or theorists or theories fit with me, and it may be more than one, and that's fine. What is that model or theory, and why? How and why does this align with your particular approach? There may be particular theorists that fit in with the fact that you're a subject specialist teacher in science, for example, and you find that just works really well. So explain, why this particular theory? Why have you chosen that? And then the next criteria of the framework is about this notion of preventative strategies. So one of the core foundational assumptions with positive classroom management is that you will never be able to eliminate misbehavior. You should never expect that you can eliminate misbehavior completely. So you must take a preventative and minimization approach. So having a range of strategies that you can use to prevent misbehavior and also minimize it and deal with the problem or the conflict or the non-compliance when you face it. Knowing that you're always going to face it, even in very small ways, whether it's students talking or not using equipment appropriately, or in larger issues with power struggles and things of that nature. So you need to be thinking about from the very get-go, well, how do I prevent and minimize misbehavior? It's about connecting and building relationships with students. And that the research is pretty universal across all the different theorists and strategists around classroom management. They say that number one, the first thing you must do is connect with your students and build relationships with them, because students behave for teachers that they respect and that they like. So if you can connect with them in real, tangible, meaningful ways, they're much more likely to behave for you. And when you do deal with misbehavior, they're going to listen and they're going to respond quickly. It's not always the case, but to a large extent, they will respond very quickly, and it'll stay at a low level if they have a relationship with you. So that's kind of the first criteria to address. And then as well, you're thinking about, well, how's my classroom laid out? How is that going to determine the way students are behaving? How do they have access to resources? Thinking about, how do I set my expectations? What are my rules? And is there a code of conduct in this classroom? Are there fundamental non-negotiables, for example? You might have 3 non-negotiables. And this stuff I will be talking about in further YouTube videos more explicitly, but just giving you a sense of what is required here in the assessment. Routines and procedures are so critical. Again, I'll talk in more detail about that later in the topics. And catering for individual and diverse student needs, because you're going to have a group of anywhere between 15 students and 32 students, depending on the makeup of your classroom. But they're going to be all different. They're different people from different backgrounds, from different family structures, different goals and motivations that they have in their mind coming to your unit, your subject. So how do you cater for individual student differences, learning differences, cultural language differences, etc., etc. And so then, the last part is then what's called there's preventative strategies and corrective strategies. So corrective strategy are things that, well, how do I correct their misbehavior? If they are doing something wrong, how do I, so this is the side where something goes wrong, and they are not compliant, or they're not following the rules or the expectations that you've set out, or the routine. So what do I do? So what are the ways in which I employ a corrective strategy to ensure they get back on the right track? So that's that kind of next stage. So once you've done all this stuff around preventative strategies, how do I then correct a student's misbehavior in some way that aligns with everything else, the theory that you've drawn upon, the relationships and the preventative strategies you're using? So there needs to be that alignment, and it needs to feel cohesive. And so you build that over the semester. And this is the thing, you start working on this now, and the topics, and completing your learning journal, for example, which is your personal kind of learning document where you do all the activities and reflections that are suggested in the activities on the unit Blackboard page. And through that work and engaging with the Facebook group as well. So many of you have already requested to join. So if you haven't yet, do that now through Blackboard. There's a link there. Request to join, engage in discussion with your peers, engage in discussion with me, ask questions, feedback stuff from your learning journal, and do that collaborative work on the Facebook group. And I find with that, you'll be able to, certainly with feedback, with discussion with your peers, is the best way, particularly around classroom management, is the best way to improve your practice and to improve and embed your philosophy with classroom management. So, if you haven't been a person who's necessarily collaborated with your peers through discussion boards or online, the Facebook group that I run, I don't do discussion boards, I only do the Facebook group. Please do so in this unit because it's so critical with this stuff, and you really want to go into your next prac with a really robust classroom management philosophy. So that's assessment 1. So if you have any questions about assessment 1 at this stage, it's the first one that's due, or any questions throughout, please let me know. We will have a collaborate session around assessment 1, so closer to when it's due. So if you have any questions, you can ask it then, but just email me at any stage. So assessment 2, so this is a different kind of assessment. It's an essay-based assessment. It still gets you thinking about your own kind of stance as well and reflection, but it's focused on a particular topic, some context-driven challenge that schools are facing. So I've looked at, I've given you 3. So it's about taking that deep dive into this social issue or challenge. So we've got 3 of them. Bullying in schools, which I'm sure you're already aware of, is quite a major factor in young people's lives. It probably always has been, but maybe now more so with social media. Refugee students in schools, again, we're having to deal with refugee students and the particular challenges they bring in certain school contexts. It's every day. In others, perhaps not so much. Gender and LGBTI issues in schools as well is another major focal point in many teachers' lives now, having to deal with these things that maybe 20 years ago these things were hidden. Teachers didn't have to acknowledge them, but now very much so they do. So you can choose one of the 3. It's about researching, and you'll find on the unit Blackboard page under the assessment section, there's a whole range of online resources that I've collected to get you started, and then it's about doing some wider reading for yourself. But you have to, so part A, you have to outline the chosen issue, the research that surrounds that, and particularly around thinking about risks. So what risks does that particular challenge or issue face for schools, and how it plays out in classrooms. And then part B, you've got to think about it's a report and a critique on the strategies, programs, and tactics used by schools, states, or agencies in meeting these challenges. So the word critique is in there for a very specific reason, is that some of, it's the idea of kind of going, okay, are these things working? Are they just paying lip service to this? Or is it really, these things look like they are making a difference? Again, if you've been on prac already, or you've maybe worked in schools in some context, or you have your own children, bring in that as well and think about, well, this program I had experience with as a parent, if you are a parent, and it made no difference to the school or my kid's life in terms of combating bullying, for example. So I'd love to hear your personal perspective there in that critique, and that's encouraged. So yeah, and then the final part of the assessment is kind of getting you to imagine that you are a teacher who's been given leadership responsibility for the issue that you've chosen, and it's about thinking, well, I want to. I have all this understanding now of this issue, and I'd like to communicate that understanding to the school, the wider school, but particularly parents and their students. So it's about creating this letter as a hypothetical information night, and what content would go into that letter. And it's about engaging with the very critical stakeholders in the school, which are the parents and the students, but also the wider school, and maybe bringing everybody onto the same page. Is in that notion of how are we as a school addressing this issue, and how are we combating the risks and meeting it head on in a positive way. And again, this idea of this positive whole school strategies is really key. So it's not about sweeping it under the rug, or it's not about we will there'll be a no tolerance policy towards bullies, and they'll be expelled as soon as they're found out. That's a deficit model. That's kind of a control and coercion model, and that's not encouraged in this assessment. So the idea is positive strategies. How do we maybe equip the victims of bullying with resilience strategies, for example, so that they can become more resilient and maybe not use particular language when they're faced with bullying or something like that. So again, based on the research you've done, you will hopefully be full bottle and informed to do Part C there. So that's I think that the really critical elements of the unit outline, particularly around assessments. But again, just to reinforce, engage with the unit in several ways. Think about your own work and going through the topics at the pace that you can, in regards to your particular situation, whether you're working or family dynamics and things like that. So you work your way through those topics as you feel you need. I will be uploading YouTube videos and other discussion points in the Facebook group in a timely manner each week, so that there'll be things to do on the Facebook group as well. So engage with that. YouTube videos to watch where I'll explain through concepts, ideas, whatever the content is, and I'll work through that as well for you, and ensure that you are, working through the material and doing those activities is really important. And as well, the collaborate sessions when they're being held, if you can make it, please engage with your peers and myself in that. So I will be letting you know when those collaborate sessions are. They're not weekly, but there will be 3 or 4 throughout this unit. If you have any questions, please email me at any stage. If you want to flick some writing or part of an assessment my way, you can do so as well. So in terms of everything to do with the unit, that's it. This last few minutes, I'll just talk about my background. So if you've heard that before, you're welcome to stop now, pause now, and I will best of luck with your learning in this unit. And again, I'm always available via email if you have any questions. So my personal professional background, I've been in education now for 12 years. I graduated from the University of Western Australia with a graduate diploma in education. My first year teaching was 2005. I was a secondary history teacher and social science teacher, and I spent my first year teaching at a private Christian school in Perth, and I learnt a lot through that year. But at the end of that year, I realised that I didn't want to work in a private religious school. It just didn't fit my values, and I wanted to get a wider experience of teaching in different contexts. So I moved to London, and I spent about a year and a half teaching in London in a wide variety of different contexts, spending a lot of time as what they call a supply teacher, which is like a relief teacher in all sorts of schools around London City. Ended up having some longer term positions in what they term behaviour centres in London, which is for students who have been excluded from mainstream schooling, so very behaviourally and emotionally challenging students. So learned a great deal about managing students through that experience, and I'm sure I'll share a few stories as we go along in regards to that. But I came back to Perth wanting to continue to make a difference with tough, challenging young people. So I got a job at a school called Southern River College in Gosnells. So if you're from Perth or know Perth, you'll understand that that's a tough community in Gosnells, in that area. And there were some wonderful families and wonderful students who attended Southern River College that I got a chance to meet and work with and make a huge amount of difference in their lives. I thought in just being committed. I was there for 4 years, but it was also very tough and emotionally draining. And at the end of 4 years, I'd gotten quite depleted in terms of my emotional energy. So I moved. I won a position at Curtin University as an outreach officer. So using all that experience I'd gained in tough teaching environments, I ended up facilitating programs at Curtin University in regards to student equity, so particularly working with students from low socioeconomic backgrounds and Indigenous students and regional students. And that was fantastic. I spent a couple of years doing that, working with a whole range of schools in Perth and Greater Perth and in the regions. And then I missed teaching, so I started to take on some sessional work with the School of Education at Curtin, and that got me a job full-time as a lecturer. So around that time, I also started my PhD. So again, I was trying to make the most of the context that I was working in. Decided to start my PhD, and then I was very happy as a full-time lecturer and managing to work my way through my PhD slowly. But at the end of last year, my wife, got an opportunity to come to Brisbane for her employment. So we all moved, our family, my 2 kids. I have 2 children, Maya, she's 4.5, and Eli, he'll be 2 in about a month. And we all moved over here to Brisbane, but that gave me the opportunity to do my PhD full-time. I'm now a full-time student on an APA scholarship, looking to complete my thesis, which, funnily enough, is about emotions in learning to teach. So comes from a personal place as well in regards to dealing with my own emotions being a teacher. But I am a sessional lecturer for both Curtin University now and Queensland University of Technology. And I do other work, unit development, and based on my experience developing units over a number of years, and I've supported and worked in teams to do the course, the MTeach course. So this is now my 3rd unit I've helped develop. So that's really exciting too, and I enjoy and feel that the online teaching environment, particularly through engaging you in YouTube videos like this, I found to be quite an enjoyable experience. So that's a bit about me. I'm sure I'll share more stories as we go along about my teaching experience and the strategies and the hints and tips and things I've learnt, and I hope you'll engage with me as well. Thank you for watching this YouTube video. I hope it's been informative for you, and yeah, I'll catch you on Facebook very soon.